The moment Harold Benson stepped into the elegant dining room of the Sterling table, heads turned, whispers followed, and laughter erupted quietly among a few diners, because no one expected a frail-looking, 72-year-old black man with silver hair and worn hands to claim a presence in a space dominated by youth, wealth, and entitlement. Harold, dressed in a simple navy cardigan and pressed trousers, moved with a dignity shaped by decades of experience and quiet perseverance, clutching a small leather briefcase that looked out of place beside the sparkling glasses and polished cutlery. The maitre d', a tall man in his 30s with a sharp suit and dismissive smile, approached him with polite hesitation, glancing at his table reservation, and remarked that perhaps another time would be better, his tone courteous but dripping with subtle condescension. Harold, undeterred, responded calmly, explaining that he had reserved a table weeks in advance, his voice steady, deep, and measured, carrying the weight of someone who had long learned to navigate spaces where respect was never freely given. A few younger patrons snickered under their breaths, exchanging amused glances, treating him like an inconvenience, an old man out of place in luxury, as if age and skin color diminished entitlement or intellect. Harold moved slowly to his table, placing his briefcase down and sitting with patience, eyes scanning the room with quiet awareness, observing everything that went unnoticed by those who believed superiority came from wealth and youth. The waiter, a young woman in her 20s with neatly tied hair and a crisp uniform, hovered nearby, unsure whether to serve him immediately, and Harold, noticing hesitation, smiled slightly, his expression calm but carrying a subtle command that demanded attention without force. "Good evening," he said softly, nodding at the staff, acknowledging their presence without fear or resentment, a gesture that unsettled those who had mocked him moments earlier. The restaurant filled with the low hum of conversation, punctuated by stifled laughter at his apparent age and quiet demeanor, unaware that behind those gentle eyes lay intelligence, resilience, and a story that could turn their assumptions upside down. Harold unfolded a small notebook, jotting down a few notes, as the staff whispered among themselves, some exchanging incredulous looks at his composed silence. If you can feel the tension and anticipation in this moment, take a second to subscribe, because what happens next will leave the entire restaurant stunned. And if you have ever been underestimated or laughed at, comment where you are watching from, because this story is only just beginning and the truth is about to hit hard. The murmurs and suppressed laughter did not escape Harold Benson's keen eyes, 72-year-old wisdom etched into every line of his face, silver hair catching the soft glow of the chandeliers, as he calmly observed the staff scrambling subtly and the diners sneaking curious glances. Their entitlement, colliding with the quiet force of a man they had assumed was fragile and incapable of commanding any attention. The maitre d', sensing an invisible challenge to his authority, shifted nervously, offering menus with a stiff courtesy that failed to hide the unease in his movements, while the waiter, a young woman barely out of college with a crisp white apron and anxious expression, hesitated by his side, unsure whether to interrupt or wait for instructions, and Harold, noticing every detail with patient clarity, smiled slightly, not mocking but firm, a gesture that seemed to ripple through the room, unsettling even the most confident of the younger diners. He spoke softly, requesting a small adjustment to the table setting, a subtle but precise rearrangement, and as the staff complied, fumbling with minor instructions, it became painfully clear that their professionalism was easily rattled by someone they underestimated, and whispers spread faster than the clinking of silverware, curiosity and judgment mingling in the air like static electricity, while Harold's movements, steady, deliberate, and assured, communicated competence without the need for arrogance, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of his briefcase as if calculating strategy in a war none had seen coming. A few bold diners began to chuckle quietly, thinking it harmless fun, not realizing that every subtle gesture of their sneers and amusement had been catalogued by the man before them, whose life had been a meticulous study of human behavior, patience, and resilience in spaces designed to diminish him. And when he finally looked up from his notebook, eyes locking with the maitre d', the silence that followed was deafening, the staff stiffening as if frozen in the weight of unspoken judgment. Because Harold's gaze did not demand obedience, it measured truth, exposed bias and reflected it back to those who had assumed superiority. He cleared his throat, speaking in a calm, resonant tone that drew every ear, every glance, and every judgmental whisper, articulating a few observations about service flow, timing, and efficiency, connecting dots the staff had ignored, and the room shifted, the invisible hierarchy trembling, diners leaning forward unconsciously as they sensed that their assumptions about age, skin color, and capability were being dismantled with subtle precision, while Harold's quiet dignity amplified the tension. His voice firm yet gentle, each word landing with the gravity of someone who had faced prejudice and emerged unbroken. The maitre d' swallowed hard, the waiter straightened involuntarily, and the younger patrons' amusement faltered as they noticed that the old man they had mocked had already begun to reveal competence, insight, and a quiet power that demanded recognition. And as Harold closed his notebook and allowed a slight nod, acknowledging the staff's compliance and the shifting attention of every diner, the room seemed to exhale collectively, a fragile respect forming in the spaces where laughter had once reigned. And if you can feel the tension, revelation, and anticipation in this moment, take a second to subscribe, because what happens next will shatter every assumption and leave the entire restaurant speechless. And if you have ever been underestimated or laughed at, comment where you are watching from, because the truth is about to strike with unstoppable force. The entire dining room seemed to hold its breath as Harold Benson, 72, with silver hair catching the soft daylight filtering through the large windows, slowly rose from his chair, his navy cardigan and pressed trousers immaculate, carrying himself with a quiet authority that no amount of mockery could diminish, while every staff member and diner felt the weight of his presence pressing into the space like a tide. He approached the maitre d', eyes steady and observant, speaking in calm, precise sentences that outlined inefficiencies in service flow, timing, and customer interaction, observations so accurate and insightful that even the most confident staff member could not dispute them. And as he continued, connecting patterns no one had noticed, murmurs of astonishment replaced laughter, diners shifting uneasily as their assumptions about age, color, and ability crumbled under the clarity of his words, while the young waiter, her hands trembling slightly, realized that every instruction he gave was measured, fair, and utterly transformative, revealing a strategy that could change the restaurant's operations overnight. And as Harold traced each point with gentle gestures, his fingers tapping lightly against his briefcase, the room collectively sensed that brilliance had appeared in the least expected form, his voice calm but commanding, each syllable carrying decades of wisdom and resilience. And as he paused, letting the gravity of his insight settle, the maitre d's jaw tightened, staff froze mid-motion, and diners leaned forward unconsciously, stunned into silence by the revelation that the man they had mocked and dismissed had just shown them the way to excellence, efficiency, and respect simultaneously. Harold finally allowed a faint, knowing smile, his eyes sweeping the room as if silently measuring the transformation in perception, and the diners who had laughed now lowered their heads, while some staff members exchanged awed glances, realizing that respect is never optional, that prejudice carries consequences, and that courage, intelligence, and quiet dignity can overturn years of assumptions in moments. And if this moment resonates with you, take a second to subscribe, because the final chapter will reveal a conclusion so satisfying it will stay in every mind present. And if you have ever been underestimated, yet acted with clarity and patience, comment where you are watching from, because what follows will cement a lesson in courage, insight, and the power of respect. The room remained suspended in stunned silence as Harold Benson, 72, silver hair gleaming in the daylight, slowly returned to his seat, his navy cardigan neat, pressed trousers sharp, and eyes reflecting decades of experience and quiet authority, while every staff member and diner realized the magnitude of what had just unfolded. The maitre d', once so confident in his control, now shifted uneasily, understanding that leadership is measured by humility and insight, not titles or youth, and the young waiter, her hands steady at last, nodded subtly, recognizing that the lesson Harold had imparted extended far beyond table settings and service flow. It was a revelation about respect, observation, and recognizing talent where it is least expected. Patrons whispered amongst themselves, their amusement evaporated, replaced by awe as they watched an old man, often dismissed, orchestrate clarity and improvement without a hint of anger or condescension, his calm authority more compelling than any raised voice, while Harold's measured gestures traced patterns of excellence across the room, and he spoke once more, softly but with weight, emphasizing that competence cannot be ignored, that assumptions about age, color, or appearance are the chains of the unwise, and that patience, intelligence, and dignity have the power to reshape any environment. The maitre d' swallowed, finally nodding, understanding that every flaw had been illuminated not through confrontation, but through thoughtful demonstration, and the staff, now inspired rather than intimidated, began adjusting operations as Harold had suggested, each movement reflecting a newfound respect for insight and for the man who had so effortlessly dismantled prejudice. Diners, once quick to mock, now observed quietly, some whispering apologies for their earlier laughter, while others marveled at the transformation in the room, seeing in Harold an enduring reminder that wisdom often resides in the most underestimated people. As Harold collected his briefcase and stood, the entire restaurant seemed to exhale collectively, the tension replaced by reverence and the subtle thrill of having witnessed courage and knowledge triumph over arrogance. He paused at the door, eyes sweeping the room one last time, and with a gentle nod, left, leaving a trail of reflection and respect behind him, a lesson etched into every corner, that underestimating someone because of age, race, or appearance is a costly mistake, and that dignity, patience, and insight can overturn prejudice in ways anger never could. If you feel the triumph of this moment, take a second to subscribe, because stories like Harold's remind us that courage and wisdom are timeless, and if you have ever been dismissed yet proven your worth, comment where you are watching from, because the lesson is simple, clear, and unforgettable. Respect is earned, insight is powerful, and humility in leadership creates lasting change.